You know that feeling when you're arguing with someone and you just know that you've outsmarted them? Well, I don't know that feeling, because it rarely happens. Fast thinking is something that not everyone has in them, but thanks to this video, this is about to change. Let's listen to Dr. Jordan Peterson, an influential clinical psychologist and professor, and discover how to enhance our critical thinking skills, learning simple tactics to outsmart those around us. After listening to his advice, you'll learn to have clearer and faster thinking skills. Get ready to outsmart everyone.
I know lots of people who've been staggeringly successful and watched them throughout my life. I mean, those people, you don't want to have an argument with them. They'll just slash you into pieces. And not in a malevolent way. It's like, if you're going to make your point and they're going to make their point, you better have your points organized, because otherwise you are going to look like and be an absolute idiot. Thinking makes you act effectively in the world. Thinking makes you win the battles you undertake, and those could be battles for good things. If you can think and speak and write, you are absolutely deadly. Nothing can get in your way. Here's your sword, here's your M16, right? Here's your bulletproof vest. Like, you learn how to use them. My thoughts are much more refined than they were at the beginning of this process. It's not my arguments are in better shape. It's not the right way to think about it. It's that I'm clearer about what I know. I can articulate it better. And if you can formulate your arguments coherently and make a presentation, if you can speak to people, if you can lay out a proposal, God, people give you money, they give you opportunities, you have influence. Teach people to be articulate, because that's the most dangerous thing you can possibly be. Thinking allows our thoughts to die instead of us. And so imagine a creature that's incapable of thought has to act something out, a representation of the world or an intent. It has to be embodied. And then if that fails, well, it fails in action. And so the consequence of that might be death, might be very severe. Whereas once you can think, you can represent the world abstractly. You can divorce the abstraction from the world, and then you can produce avatars of yourself. I usually think in words, and I think pretty formally in words. You know, if thinking is an internalized conversation, which at least is one form of thinking, is that you spin off avatars of yourself and you say, well, you take this position and you take this position and you take this position, and then you have each fictional part of yourself lay out the argument and argue it through. The whole argument has to make sense as a whole. Okay, you can think rather unclearly and still make an argument that works as a whole. Sometimes I read essays written by intuitive students, and the essay works as a whole. Like, there's a good idea in it, but it's very badly written, but there's an idea there. So it sort of succeeds at the highest level. But then if something's written real well, it's every word is the right word. Every phrase is the right phrase. The phrases are put into sentences properly. The sentences are organized into paragraphs properly. And you have to edit. No one ever tells students why they should write something. It's like, well, you have to do this assignment. Well, why are you writing? Well, you need the grade. It's like, no, you need to learn to think. It's useful to think. It's better to think than not to think. And that might seem self-evident, but thought can be troublesome and stir up trouble, and your thoughts can be inaccurate. So it's perhaps not that unreasonable to start the questioning. You ask yourself a question, you receive an answer in some mysterious manner. There's an internal revelation of sorts. That's the spontaneous thought. You know, when you sit down to write a book, thoughts come to you, perhaps because you pose yourself a question, and no one knows how that works, but we experience it, that thoughts manifest themselves in the theater of our imagination. If you ask yourself a question, it's a real question, you get an answer or not. Thoughts start to appear in your head. So
from somewhere.
That's right, from somewhere.
Where do they come from? Do you have a sense?
Depends on what you're aiming at. So imagine that your intent is to make things better. Then maybe they come from the place that's designed to make things better. Maybe your intent is to make things worse. Then they come from hell. All this is conscious. So that's the revelatory aspect. And then there's the critical aspect, which is, well, now you've thought this and perhaps you've written it down. Can you generate counter positions? Are there universes that you can imagine where this doesn't apply? Are there situations where it doesn't apply? Are there better ways of formulating that thought? But I would say, with regard to critical thought, and to some degree with regard to productive thought, an indeterminate proportion of that is dependent on speech. Thought is internalized speech. And the dialectical process that constitutes critical thinking is internalized speech. The quality of our thought is actually dependent on our ability to speak our minds. So I started to make my thoughts more public. They seem to appeal to more and more people. And so I don't know if that's a threshold phenomenon. because maybe it is, as you start to become specialized as a scientist, in some sense your vision narrows and narrows, although it gets more high resolution at the level that you're operating. But you kind of pass through a needle, let's say, out the other side where the thing you're studying starts to become everything again. One of the things you have to learn is to not provide people with your words too much. What you want is for them to formulate the conclusion, and you can guide them through the process of investigation. It's the uppermost expression of personhood, the ability to have the words that you should speak reveal themselves to you and to have the right to express them as you see fit.